so my wife can see what a mess I made of this. Um, what I do is I turn bowls, only bowls, because I don't dare touch a skew. And the main thing is, or I talked, I think earlier about how to do the initial turning on a bowl, the rough turn. It's because people don't at craft fairs don't seem to like oblong bowls. If it's a natural edge bowl, I'll turn it all the way to a finished product because you can't really tell if it's warped or not. But if you get a bowl like this, so this is a rough turned cherry bowl, and you see it's not round anymore. What happens is that and forgive me if I'm saying too much of the basics, but the side grain shrinks in probably between 8 or 9%, and the end grain doesn't shrink as much. So you end up with a bowl that's longer this way than it is wide. And if you turn it or dry it and do a finished turn, you're going to end up with a bowl that's how should we say, you're going to end up with a bowl that has got narrower sides than here, depending on how you turn it. And so that when you rough turn a bowl, you want to make it so that it is thick enough that when you return it, you end up with a bowl where you can get an even side. I have to back up. Even wall thickness all the way around. The rule of thumb, and I think I've talked about this before, is that you want your wall thickness to be about 10% of your total diameter. So if you have a 10-inch bowl, you want your wall to be about 1 inch thick. And then you let it dry. And it varies on the type of wood you're using, but usually, actually, I'm going to take this off. I think I'm far enough away from everybody, if that's all right. Yeah, okay. I can breathe. You leave it, let's say if it's a 10-inch bowl, you leave it 1 inch thick. And then I usually figure it needs about a year per inch of wood to totally dry or get to a stable level of moisture. Wood never completely gets rid of moisture, as you'll notice from the tabletop over there. It'll vary from season to season. It'll take on moisture, lose moisture, but you can get it to a point where it's fairly stable and doesn't change in size too much. I also tend to do anchor seal on the end grain to slow down the drying on the end grain. Think of the grain as a series of soda straws. They're open on the end, and that's where the moisture escapes out more quickly, therefore causing cracks in your bowl. This is dried for about a year. I date my bowls on the bottom. I cover them with anchor seal on the end grain. I put them in a paper bag to slow down the drying process, and then I stick them up on a shelf in my garage and just let them sit there. And 90% of the time I'll come out with a bowl without major cracks in it. Again, you want to make sure when you're turning it to get rid of the pith. So the pith on this one was probably about here, thereabouts. So you lose about an inch or so. Again, it depends on the type of wood. So what I want to spend most of my time concentrating on is how do you remount this? How do you get it up onto the lathe? One of the problems is, as you see, your tenon also becomes oval. And if you stick that in the truck, and also the shelf here is not flat anymore. And when you attach your bowl to a truck, you want to make sure that you have a perfectly flat shelf here, and you want a round tenon, and so that the truck gets an even grab on it. Because let's say you grab it when it's oval like this, and you do some turning on it, then you got to take it off and finish a project for your wife who asks, you got to finish that bowl for me. Then you put it back on and you don't have it exactly in the same place. It's going to wobble again. You're going to lose the roundness. So you've got to first deal with that tenon. And there are a number of ways of doing it. There's a quick and dirty way. Probably you have a center hole in the bottom there from the rough turning. And this is probably the least effective way to do it, but it's the easiest, is you put on your chuck. I leave the jaws open, and it doesn't matter, you don't need any padding because you're going to be turning the inside of the bowl out. You plop your yeah. Yeah, you can do that. You can weigh them. You can have a moisture meter. I don't. It's too much pain in the butt. I just go by how thick it is, and most of my gotta get used to. Yeah, it's just a matter. Most of my bowls tend to be inch to an inch and a half, and so I just judge it based on the length of time that I let it dry, and has worked pretty well. So the quick and dirty and not very good way of doing it is you just plop your bowl on there. The problem with this method, then you can go ahead and turn the outside and turn your tenon first and turn the outside of your bowl and flip it around, grab it in the truck. The problem is that your tenon, depending on the wood, moves, or not so much it moves, is the wood will move and reshape itself. This may not be the center anymore. The center can, move off. If you round this off, get a nice round tenon and a nice flat shelf here, you could end up having your bowl off center enough that when you go to turn it, you don't have enough wood on one side to get a good round bowl of the thick wall thickness that you want. Okay, there we go. So if you have a bowl that doesn't warp as much and you don't have other methods of centering it up, it's a usable way. I've done this method for years and gotten passable bowls out of it. The trouble is that you may have it so that you have the center of your bowl is nicely, it's got the rings centered down at the bottom, and you want to save that. You don't want your rings to be off to the side. You get a bowl like that, it's nicely centered. You want to maintain that that look of having the bowl balanced and having the rings of your wood centered up right in the center of the bowl. So with this method, you don't have that option of being able to move your bowl around and trying to center it up. Option number 2, where's it? A lot of this I learned from watching Glenn Lucas videos, and I can't recommend him more strongly. If you're into bowl turning, he's one of the finest production wood bowl turners that I know of. He's an Irish turner, and he has lots of videos online that you can see. They're shorter versions of the ones you have to buy, but they're really good at. He's really good at talking through the basics of bowl turning. So the other method, you've got Glenn Lucas. Yeah. So the other method is you've got your grain running on the bowl this way, and you take straight, just basic framing tri-square or whatever, and you have it flat on your bowl. This one's got a bump in the middle. Let's see if I can find a better one. So again, your grain is running this way. Put that flat on there, and you bring it up so that you're touching the bowl. If it's a taller bowl, if it touches here, that's okay. And you make a mark on your framing square. Doesn't matter where it is, or your, tri-square. And you mark off there, and then you come the other direction. Again, keeping it flat on the bottom of the bowl. And you mark off here, the same mark. And then you draw a line. Ideally they're parallel, but get as close as you can. And then you flip it around 90 degrees, so you're going perpendicular to your grain. That's me that's doing that. And again, you mark off. It's hard to see in the line there. And then you mark. I can't see the mark. Oh, there it is. Okay. So you've got a square here, and then to find the center of the square, you just go diagonally across. And that gives you a better approximation of a center. Do you have, Chris, a center puncher? Is there one? Yeah. Yep. Perfect. Yes, and I'll show you. Here's the center. Now, right, the center finder, see how close it gets. again, if you're using a center finder, this is not a bad method to use. You always want to go perpendicular to the grain and parallel to the grain. If you do it off the side, you don't know what you're going to get, but see how close this comes. So the center finder, you're over here a bit. My punch is not quite the right spot. There we go. So three methods of finding, or two methods of finding the center on that. This works better. It's too bad this bowl isn't very dramatic in showing you how far off it can be, but I've had it sometimes be as much as a quarter inch off of the where there's a lot of, you know, if the growth of the tree is very one-sided, it'll shrink a lot more on one side than another. But that method works pretty well. And then, but you don't want to mount it up against this, because that's going to use the center of this spot here rather than taking into account the outside center. So let's see, first we've got to get rid of. There it is. I can't recommend strongly enough Vicmark chucks. This is not this. I don't get any cut from this. Wish I did. But these are amazing chucks. They're incredibly heavy, beautifully machined, and if you ever want to buy one, let me know. I'll send you a link. Place you buy them in Australia. It's including the shipping, it can be about $50, $60 cheaper than buying the equivalent chuck in the States. And since they're made in Australia, you're not taking away from the manufacturer. And it's the exchange rate of the Australian dollar versus US dollar and stuff like that. But they're great chucks. This is, I guess you could call it a jam chuck. It's a way of mounting the bowl, but you've got a bowl that is as you can see on this bowl, I don't know where it's the best place to get it for the camera. Well, actually the side view. It crowns up here and here. And this section of it is lower than that part. So if you put that up against a flat surface, damn thing's heavy. It's going to wobble. And so this is again something Glenn Lucas developed. This is made up of just, you can use plywood or MDF or whatever. And I probably overbuilt it as usual. Just use a piece of 3/4 or bigger MDF. I did 2, which was silly, but I only had a small faceplate. Ideally, you would use the largest faceplate you can get, or that you have, like a 6-inch one would be great. That really spreads out the area that offers stability. And then you have 2 sections like this that leave a natural groove down the middle. Mine's about 6 inches. You can, if you do a lot of smaller bowls, probably one that's only about 4 inches. in the middle works better. And then, because you've got, if you put it there, see it wobbles. You move it around until you get to the point where the high points sit in the groove, and you've got a fairly flat surface. This is a really warped bowl, so it's going to be, and the fun part about it is that the pith runs sort of off to an angle. But what you're trying to do is get it so that you get as little rocking as possible. And this is the fourth method, or not yet. Let me get this in close. When you do this, you want to use a cup rather than a cone-shaped center, because you'll be tapping in at various places till you find the exact center. So, and I've drawn some, or cut in some lines on, you can barely see them. And so what you try and do first of all is get, and this is the tricky part. Actually, let me use this. Use the your tool rest to try to find the center. And what I do is I'm going to get one that's a little easier to demonstrate, because this has got multiple wobbles. Worst case, it is the worst case. Okay, let's do it. We'll make it work. What you're trying to do is get this centered up on your disc. And so if you, since this part is narrower than from here to here, you start with finding the center horizontally. You line up your tool rest and turn it in just enough so you get it to hold it there, and you spin it around to the other side, and you see we're quite a ways off. Movie bowl. Oops. Sorry, Gary, messing up all your cameras. Yep. A long ways off. So much easier when you're in a shop than when you've got a crowd watching you. If you drink enough coffee, you can shake it, your fingers shake enough. Yeah. Still got to go. Okay. Now measuring it this way. So you're trying to get it so it's even. I'm not sure if you can see from that. So it's just barely touching there. And then over here. So side to side, we're pretty close to the edge there. And then across the grain, we've got about 1/8 of an inch there, about 1/8 of an inch there. So that looks pretty well centered. It's, if you look at where the old cup rings, where we're off, or it's moved from where the old center was a bit. So you get that locked down. This is, I think Glenn Lucas uses, it's like a corrugated rubber that you see on top of tool chests, or ribbed rubber. This is, if you're married to a costume designer, you use heel stuff you put on the bottom of actors' shoes to give them a little traction on stage on their heels or toes. And so she had, oh, I've got a ton of that. Great, thank you, Rachel. And so you've got a bowl that is fairly centered for the wood that you have. You're not going to end up taking more off of one side than another. And so you make sure you're locked well. And then the next thing is to go after this tenon. And you can see how far off the old tenon was. Yes. That wake everybody up. I think I need a lot more than a hand, that's for sure. Yep. Left foot. There we go. You know, the worst part is that I'll be working in the shop and then I'll have to do some detail work, and I'll put my glasses down and I'll work on it, and then I'll go, Rachel, can you come find my glasses for me? Next time I'm going to get ones with really thick plastic frames, and then so then you can see them. So the main thing we're trying to do now is to get this turned down so it's a nice round tenon. And I don't know what I've got here for, so I've got about 4 inches. Trying to make sure I've got a chuck that's going to work. I left home one of my chucks. Ooh. Okay. Do you know what the, Chris, do you have, I left home one of my chucks. Do you have one that, pardon? Oh, that's right. Well, so I use a scraper that I've ground down so it's a little bit less than 90 degree, because I use dovetail jaws, and is this going to throw you off? You all right? Okay. Okay, it's okay? Too much? We'll just do it without. So, and go in very slowly. You can also use a when you don't get the knocking, you can, here it's how it's smoothed out. So you've got a round circle on the edge. Yeah, a little bit of. And then come in from the out. The other thing you can use is a detail gouge to get right down into the corner, because you want to have that. You want to have that corner very clean, and if anything, you want this surface here undercut just a touch, because you want the jaws of your chuck to rest firmly on the on this shelf here, and you want your taper in a little bit if you're using dovetail jogs. We'll use serrated. In that case, you want your tenon to be square. Such. There. Oh, thick this way. I usually do it about 3/8 of an inch. This is has step jaws in it, so it's, I think 3/8 is about what you get. Yeah, that's just 3/8. Most jaws though are, I think, 1/2 inch, and I don't think you need to go much longer than 3/8 of an inch. If you've got a good surface here that your jaws are resting up against, and you have your tenon matches pretty much your dovetail of your jaw, then you'll get a good grab, and a longer tenon isn't going to make a huge amount of difference. I've times worked with this as little as a 1/4 inch tenon, and that's held up very nicely. I don't really push it hard. I don't go in and do really deep cuts, because you can rip it right out of the jaws. Huh. Oh, you mean so the jaws are not, you want it pretty close to the. Oh, yes, right. I think that's good for if you're working on long pieces, maybe, or deep bowl, really deep bowl. I haven't had much experience in that, no. Mm-hmm. He's good. That's a little less than 4 inches. So once you've established a good tenon, then I like to turn a bit of the bottom, and we're going to get now into grain direction. I brought some handouts if you want for later on. First of all, there's this is a sheet on making the jam chuck. Oops, sorry. I keep bumping it with everything. But if you go on to Glenn Lucas, he shows you how to make it. But God, it's really simple to do. There's nothing fancy about it. And the more I use it, the more I'm really pleased with what it does. The one disadvantage is that with this jam chuck plate is that it's really hard to use a 12-inch tool rest. So I have a 4-inch one that I use in this case. Grain direction. This is 101 turning, and pardon me if I'm saying the obvious. Your grain of your bowl, unlike spindle turning, where they talk about turning downhill and stuff like that, with bowl turning, you've got side grain here, and then you turn 90 degrees and you've got end grain there, and then you go side grain, then you go end grain. And so you're not cutting nice, easy, peeling off layers. Is it my mother? Tell her I'm sorry, I'm busy. So let me see, is there a broom? Do you have a broom here, Chris? A broom, just a straw broom type of thing? I'll use a brush to demonstrate, yeah. Okay, think if you've got your grain like such, if you cut against the grain like this, you're going to get a rough cut. You're going to pull out some of your fibers. You're going to end up with a rough surface, because as you cut down it, unless your tool is extraordinarily sharp, it's going to yank out fibers and leave you with holes in your wood. And they may seem like they're microscopic, but as the more the fibers you pull out could be leave a gap of about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch sometimes, depending on the wood. And then you have to go back and sand it. You're sanding off 1/8 of an inch of your bowl. That's a lot of sanding to do. What you want to do is make a cut where your fibers below the cut are supporting the fibers above, so that when you're cutting this way, you see the fibers are supporting, the fibers down below are supporting your cut. And so then you're slicing through the sides of the fibers in essence, rather than cutting the edge of it, if that makes sense. So think of your bowl like this. You've got the grain direction running across the bowl, so running this way. And this part is really easy to turn. Your gouge does nice, even peeling of the grain, peeling off the layer, and then it gets over here, and you want to have your cut done in such a way that you're supporting your fibers. The fibers below are supporting the fibers that you're cutting. So when you're cutting from the bottom of a bowl, you want to cut up in this direction, so that you're cutting this way, and all these fibers in here are supporting the ones above when you make your cut. Does that make sense? When you're turning on the inside of a bowl, it's just the opposite. You're going down into the bowl, and the fibers here are supporting the fibers up here. So it's I'll try to demonstrate the difference. If you're doing an end grain bowl, it's a total different option. End grain bowls, you want to turn downhill. Your fibers are running up and down on the bowl, so you want to turn downhill so that these fibers are supporting the ones up above. And when you're coming up out of a bowl, you're cutting from the inside or the center of the bowl out towards the edge. Again, these fibers are supporting the ones down below. That makes sense. So, I'm not sure if I had this before. This is a handle like I turned out of maple. You can use any hardwood, but it's got 3 sides to it. Pardon me if I'm repeating myself. And so the trick is you get your wood, you turn it down to a nice round piece of wood, and then you put a dime on the center or centered up on your piece of wood, and you mark a triangle of holes right at the outside edge of the dime. The dime seems to be just the right size to give you 3 different centers. And so then when you turn your handle, you go into one center and you turn it and you plane off just that side of the handle, and you do it 3 times and you get a nice 3-sided handle, which is really easy to hold and in your hand, and it doesn't spin around. Okay. There are multiple ways of cutting. If you use the Ellsworth method, you've got your tool at an angle, about a 45-degree angle to the work. Your handle's coming out straight, and you're pulling your tool along, and it's hard on the first cut because you've got all this bouncing material, but once you get through that material, you can get a very clean, smooth cut. Now, hopefully this will work. I'll show you the option. Let's say if you're pulling down this way, I'm not sure if this will, maybe my tool's just too sharp. It's not a bad cut, but it is rougher than this part here, because I'm going down with unsupported grain. I'm not sure if it's more a feel on this. I think if what I should have done is done a pine bowl, because when you do it with pine, you see a really dramatic difference. But the cut here is smoother than there. It's not as dramatic as I was hoping. Yeah, here you can see the really see the difference. I notice that if you can zoom in on that or not, but the difference between this part here and that is pretty dramatic. So that there are two types. There are also, so that's a pole cut that Ellsworth uses. There's another type of cut which is where I'm resting the bevel on the wood, and this can give you a really smooth cut. I find depending on the wood, the finished cut, you can really get it took that surface off and gave a nice, clean, smooth cut on here. I find it varies. Sometimes I use that cut. Sometimes I use Ellsworth's. Ellsworth also, once you've done your rough cut, then you come in and you can put your tool down at about a 45-degree angle and you do a shear cut. It's hard to say which is better. I think they're about equal. I mean, it's really a matter of taste, and sometimes it's depends on the wood that you're using. But with the Ellsworth shear cut, you can get a really fine I tend to get, with the Ellsworth, I find it's harder to control the tool. I tend to get more lines in it, which actually sand out pretty easily, but it gives a very clean, nice cut. I think that for most people, the supported cut is probably better. On the Ellsworth, if you get up to about 800, that's like a baby's bottom. Not my newest grandson. Oh God, you give me a piece of soft pine and a sharp knife and I could have whittled you a better baby than my son got. Ooh, I know. Well, he would agree with me. It's really funny because his first child was a fairly sizable baby and pretty tall, and has grown up. He's now 4, and he's he's like this. He's a big, tall kid. Baby number 2 came out normal, about 8 pounds, but he is huge. Now, he was 31 inches, if I got this right, and weighs 32 pounds at 3 months. He's kind of, I mean, it's like, you know, the Michelin kid, but they say he will, he's cute though. Anyway, that is, you know, you'll be able to come up here and feel that. You get a really nice smooth cut when you're doing the shear pull cut. You're cutting with this part of the tool right there. You're getting if you go slowly, you want your speed up, but you're moving your tool slowly, and you can get it, you know, it's smooth as my grandson's bottom. Okay, we won't go into turning this all the way, except to say that when you're turning, you stop short of the end because you don't want to mess up your face here, but also when you're going over to the end of a bowl, you're going to, you run the risk of tearing out at the end, and it's best to come in from the outside to catch that end so you don't, I'm not sure if tear out's the right word, but you don't end up with a rough edge out there. So real quickly, we'll go into do I ever do what? Oh, do I ever get caught here? Oh, I'm worse than clumsy. I'm a frequent flyer at, well, I was a frequent flyer at Dartmouth Hitchcock and ER. I've now switched over to APD. They are much faster. This cut, I was in and out in less than 45 minutes. Dartmouth Hitchcock, my record was, I think 4 hours was the shortest ever. So, you know, this, I always do it on the lathe first. I'm not sure. I find it this way I can push against the lathe to make sure I'm seated well into the chuck. Huh. I never thought of that. Yeah, you could do that. But you see, now I've got the light on. I know this is probably hard for you, but for the cameras, but you see I've got contact all the way around with the chuck. The face of the chuck is snug up to the face of the shelf that I've carved here. And you want to have your jaws closed down so they're as close to a circle as possible. If your jaws are really far way open and you've got lots of gap, then you're going to be grabbing with just the corners of your jaws. And so that you don't have much holding power of that. You really want it so that this surface here is contacting the tenon as much as possible, and that this surface, this is probably the most important part here, is sitting on the shelf of your tenon. That's what really supports it. And also making sure that your tenon is not resting on the bottom here. That's really, really key. So once you get it on there, tighten it once, twice. Apparently somebody said there's a study that was done on this that you have to do it 3 times. I'm not sure if that works, but seems to, or if that's true, but it works for me. 3 times at least, or I mean, so you're tightening it at least once or twice, or multiple times on each of the holes. You don't want to over tighten it, because sometimes you can tighten it so much that it will somehow weaken the tenon. I'm not sure what the reasoning is exactly, but I've had a tenon split off on me, break. You know, you get a catch and then it chops. So as you can see, it's still nice and wobbly. Now I can switch over to the oh, yes. Yeah, I'm done with that. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I can cut it as short as you want. Yeah. We're just going to flatten this and then do a start of a cut. Yep. Let's say we've turned all the way out the edge. Oh, I'll show you just real quickly the going in. Turn the speed down. So nice having the numbers. I just do it by the sound. That's about 450. Okay. So this is really wobbly on the outer edge. So I'm just doing the cut this way to get to the outer edge and get it semi-level, or not level, but round. So, real quickly, this, you see, when you come out to the edge like that, you get these feathers. This is not bad, but it can be really worse. Yeah, see, I've got chip out here. So you're trying to avoid that. So to clean up the edge, since we're pressed for time, I won't go into detail, but you get the idea of coming in to make the cut this way. I'd spend a lot more time on it. And then you want to flatten out this surface here. I find this just best go in. What I'm doing is twisting my body and just going straight in to, and I'm pushing down as hard as I can. So you got a nice flat surface. Okay. Bear with me, I'm going to have to dodge around camera. The hardest part, it's I've always wanted to try one of these. Wow, that is slick. My lathe, you have to take it and trudge it over and then trudge it back, but it's hard to go in to start the cut here. It bounces around. I find that if I come in and create a shelf, there we go. So you're cutting downhill, you're supported by the grain down below, and you can get a really smooth cut on it. Let me see if I can get a bad example. See what that looks like. Yeah, so you're getting a lot of tear out here, whereas this part is much smoother. It's the beginning of getting into the end grain. Yeah, again, what? Well, there's this that's in the way. Yeah, you're right. That's true with this thing. Yeah, I'm not used to. No, yeah, but just you get the idea that you're going down. You're going to get a much smoother, cleaner cut. I think I showed last time the cutting with the outside edge of your gouge. It can give you a really clean, smooth cut as opposed to going in like this. This is good for roughing out, but then coming in like that with your tool flat or the gouge part flat, and just catching that edge of the tool along the edge of like that, you can get an amazingly clean cut. Yes, left edge. So it's funny, you do it a couple times and all of a sudden you realize, no, it's not that bad. Yeah. What? A parachute? Okay. Any questions? Well, thank you. Okay.